This is Self-Starter. Hello, welcome to Self-Starter, a podcast that highlights the small business owners, the self-employed and freelancers who have taken the plunge to create their own desirable lifestyle. My name is Andy Dowling. I'm also the host of the Andy Social podcast. I play bass in the Australian metal band Lord, and I'm a dispute resolution specialist. Lots of things there. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook by searching at Andy Dowling, or you can go to selfstarter.com.au, where you'll find a number of different links and resources, not only for this podcast, but anything and everything linked to the self-employment world. So make sure you go and check that out. This episode is with KM Doyle of Livewire Studios in Ulladulla. Now, Livewire Studios have only been up and running for the past several months, and they cater for a hole in the market down there. Livewire are a theatre performance business. They cater for a whole range of different services, theatre, voice, writing, puppetry, improv, self-development courses, photography, graphics, all sorts of different things. It's a varied business, but it's really, really cool. And they're in their infancy stages of business, and KM's done so much in such a short period of time. So KM will go through a lot of this in this episode, but lots of great takeaways. You can find Livewire Studios by going to livewiretheatre.com, or you can go to facebook.com/livewiretheatre New South Wales. So I'll do that again, facebook.com/livewiretheatre NSW for New South Wales. As always, you can go to selfstarter.com.au, check out the show notes where I'll dump everything there as well. Enough of me, as always. Please enjoy this episode with KM Doyle of Livewire Studios in Ulladulla. Well, thank you very much for having me at your studio in Ulladulla, right down the south coast.
You're very welcome.
Before we get stuck into it, do you want to give a brief introduction of who you are and your business?
Sure. It's never that brief, though. My name's KM Doyle, and Livewire Studios, we do a number of different things. Yep. So we offer drama and arts programs for participants aged 1 to adult. We also do children and family-friendly entertainment, so birthday parties, corporate events and so forth. We have a working artist studio here, and we also do theatrical performances. That's the short version.
Wow. I was on the website early this morning, and I was going through all the different services that you provide, and it's quite extensive because I just thought theatre, and I'm like, a bit of drama, like in such a vague way of saying it, but I just thought, a bit of drama, a bit of sort of theatre, sort of learning to speak in front of people and perform, but it's quite detailed, and that's coming from an ignorant person that isn't part of that world whatsoever, but it's quite detailed as far as the different things that you can provide.
Yeah, it's a very extensive range. Essentially, we believe in creativity for everyone.
Yep.
And the website's not even up to date. I shouldn't be saying that, seeing as I'm also a website designer, but like the builder whose house is always falling down, my clients' websites are always up to date, but mine isn't. So there's a lot more we do that's not on the website at the moment as well. So we also, we have a music studio, we have a photographic studio. Wow. Yes, it's constantly evolving, constantly building, and we've got a fantastic space here where we can keep extending it.
Yep.
And so we do.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I read that, I think for yourself personally, you've got about 20 odd years.
Yes.
In this sort of facet of what you would call the industry of...
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. In the performing arts industry, my main background is performing arts, theatre and circus. Yeah. So, yes, I've been working professionally in that industry for 20 to 25 years, nationally and internationally. And as far as studios like this are concerned, I did run a very similar studio in Brisbane many years ago. When was that? So that was roughly 15 years ago.
Okay.
I've got extensive experience and training in that area of the industry, and as any artist would relate to or any creative would relate to, I've picked up a lot of other skills along the way and a lot of other experiences and training along the way. So my experience and training is constantly evolving, and that just feeds straight back into the studio. And the same with my staff, because they're artists and creatives as well. So our team members just keep bringing new skills and new experiences.
Feeding off each other all the time.
Exactly.
So the studio here in Ulladulla, how long has this been up and running?
The studio itself, we moved in on the 1st of July, so it's very new.
Really? Okay.
Very new. And we still have a lot we want to achieve here and a lot we want to do, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed by that, and we have to sort of keep stopping and looking around and looking at how much we have achieved in 3 months, because it looks very different than it did when we moved in on the 1st of July.
Yeah.
In the area itself, I've been in the area for 5 years now, and a whole other story. When we first moved here, I couldn't actually work because I was chronically ill. But as I started to get better, I started just offering vacation classes, and then this year, the start of this year, started offering semester classes, and that was just hiring hall spaces. And then I'd had in the back of my mind since I moved here that I wanted to start a studio. There wasn't anything like that in this area, and it seemed to be a really big hole for the community, because there's a lot of families in this community. So I had it in the back of my mind. So as soon as I started to get back to that spot where I knew I'd be able to take on the 48 hours a day that it entails of running this kind of business, I started hunting for the perfect space. And it's actually a funny story, because this premises that we're in, when we first moved to this area 5 years ago, I had in the back of my mind, oh, that's a perfect spot for that studio, and one day it's going to be mine. And it just happened to come available at that time. So it was meant to be.
Everything aligned.
Everything aligned, exactly.
Was there, okay, so there was obviously a progression over time where you had a thought in the back of your mind, but obviously it was a lead up of events and things, and getting your feelers out there, and obviously building your own network and a community of people. So when it does come time to launch something like this, you've got some people that you can draw on. Was there any fears that you had leading up to the opening of this studio? Was there any sort of concerns that you had, like, are we going to be successful? Are people going to come in? Are they going to take the classes? Are we going to have anybody rock up?
Oh, how long have you got? Okay. So, yes. I mean, there's always fears associated. Through my entire career, again, working in the arts and as a creative, nothing's ever certain. And I've spent a lot of that time self-employed. So I guess I had that behind me, that I'd done it before. Although in saying that, when I opened the one in Brisbane, I decided to do it with a week's notice and $100.
Wow.
So I tend to be a leap and hope the net will appear kind of person. And there definitely was the element of that here as well. But particular fears here, it's a completely untested industry for this area. So I couldn't look at other businesses and say, well, they succeeded or they failed. I mean, there's some that are loosely associated, but nothing like this. So it was completely untested, and there wasn't even really a way of being able to do market research to find out if it would work. So that was definitely a big fear. And I did actually negotiate with my landlords to have a 6-month trial to make sure it worked before I committed to an extensive lease. And I mean, that was a difficult process itself, but that certainly made things a lot more comfortable.
Takes a bit of pressure off.
Yeah, definitely. Other fears, as I mentioned before, my health. I have lupus, which is a chronic autoimmune condition, and it's incurable. And I ended up basically bedbound and completely unable to work for a couple of years. So that can come back at any time, and I have to be very careful with that. And obviously being self-employed and in an industry like this, which is non-stop, 7 days a week, can be 24 hours a day, I have to be very, very careful about that. And so that's a huge fear. And that was a huge fear for my husband, because he's the one that has to pick up the pieces when it all goes terribly, terribly wrong, which it has done in the past. So that was actually probably the biggest fear, which most people wouldn't have to deal with. And then financially, there's always a huge risk. It's always recommended if you start your own business that you have a good solid savings behind you. Not being able to work for a few years, I didn't have that. I had nothing. So financially, of course, it's a huge risk. And I have to say rents in this area are ridiculous.
Really?
Considering we live in an area which on a socioeconomic scale is a lot lower than, say, a city, the rents here are comparable to the city. In fact, I could get a cheaper premises in Sydney.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that.
Yes. So, but I mean, in saying that, this is a very big space. It's huge. And, I pay accordingly for such a big space. But of course, that constant pressure is on to pay the rent and to pay the staff and hopefully feed myself as well. But
that's a big
hopefully, fingers crossed.
You need to try and feed yourself to keep yourself
exactly.
going. Yeah,
but so far so good. So, those are all huge risks. And quite honestly, if I sat there and pondered them for too long, the answer would probably be, what the hell are you doing? You never do that. But it's not the kind of person I am. I am a risk taker. It's paid off in the past, and here we are.
Well, that's it. And sometimes you never know for sure what the outcome's going to be. You can put the money on it and think that it's definitely going to go in this direction, but you don't know for sure where that's going to go.
Exactly. And I mean, that's the thing. Like, as I said, I wasn't able to do really conclusive market research. All I could really go on was the fact that I'd done workshops in the area, and the workshops I was offering out of halls was probably about it's not even a quarter of what I'm offering now, because I didn't have my own space, so I couldn't offer them. So it was just going on feedback from the clients that I had and their support. And also knowing that it's a really supportive area. The community is very supportive. But all the market research in the world still can't tell you if something's going to succeed or not. World affairs can change overnight, and that changes the economy. And also, it's such a personal thing. Your own input makes such a difference that market research isn't going to tell you that.
No, that's right. And I think sometimes if we overthink all these different factors that a lot of the time are outside of our control, or they are outside of our control, we probably never leave the house, let alone do anything more than that. But so one thing that I'm thinking, and keeping in mind your recent timeline of being in the area for 5 years, and I've lived down the South Coast for 2, so I've started to see the observations of the way that things move compared to where I was living in Sydney for 10 years, and previous to that, Brisbane. So
I'm Brisbane too.
Yes, so we've got I can see the differences in pace and what's available and what's not, and I'm starting, especially doing these chats with different self-employed and small business owners and freelancers, is that there's all these little pockets or holes where there's just nothing there at the moment. There's opportunities there, and whether people see it or they don't, I don't know. But in this area, and I mean, I'm a little bit further north, so I'm closer to the big smoke. But down here, what did you have to do in that space of time? And it might have been those 5 years, or even in the last few months since you've launched the studio itself, to really get the community behind you. I read a number of different clients that you've worked with, and it's not just individuals, but there's schools, there's nursing homes, there's whole professionals as well. How do you first, I guess, get the word out there, so from a marketing point of view, but also just to get a bit of community support behind the business?
Yeah, it's been interesting, and particularly having done this before, years ago with different technologies, it's been a really interesting process. And I've actually been having discussions about this with team members in the last week about just how different things are. On one side, there was advantages in that there's effectively no competition because nobody else is doing this. I mean, there are people who just offer face painting, or there are people offering ballet classes. So there's areas of competition, but there's nothing specifically the same as what we're doing. So that goes in the plus side. But on the negative side of that is it's actually been an education process. I've had to educate the community about what we do and what we offer. Because of the fact there hasn't been anything like this, it's been a complete unknown. Even drama, I've had to educate people about what is drama.
Yep.
There's a local community theatre group here, which is very, very well supported by the community. And, you know, children can be involved in that as a very, very low fee. But the difference between learning lines, going on stage, being in a show versus doing regular classes where you're learned how to communicate effectively and network effectively and emotional intelligence and all of that kind of side, they're very, very different. And so there's been a huge education process. So that's been part of it. And from a marketing point of view, as I said, when I first had this kind of business, there was no social media.
Yeah.
So that's made a huge difference to things. Whereas it used to be you had your ad in the yellow pages and then you advertised in the local community newspaper. Here, they probably wouldn't want me to say this, but the local community newspaper I've had no response from.
Yeah.
Social media has been my biggest way of marketing, and what would you say? Peer review is more important now than I think it ever was because of social media. So I guess building up, having families who were very loyal and very supportive, having done the workshops just sporadically over the last couple of years definitely helped.
Yep.
Because then we had the word of mouth factor.
Yeah.
And I think in a small town, word of mouth is more important than anywhere.
Absolutely.
And it took a while to see that, but it could sort of, you know, register the day that people started talking.
Yep.
And that people actually started telling other people about what was going on, and that was a huge change. So social media has been a big one, although it has its own challenges. Thank you, Facebook, for constantly changing your algorithms.
We won't get into a conversation about that. We could be here for hours, but yes.
Yeah.
I feel your pain. Absolutely, I feel your pain.
Well, that's another thing I do, social media management. So I'm all over it, but it doesn't mean I'm not constantly frustrated by it. One thing we did do here is, I guess because we knew we did sort of have to educate about what we did, and also because we needed to let people know we were here. We had a huge open day.
Yep.
That was on the 1st of August. Wow, it seems so long ago, but it wasn't. 2nd of August, actually. And so we opened the studio for the day and we had free family entertainment non-stop. So we had jumping castles, we had food, we had all of our entertainers offering everything that they do. We had workshops. It was a huge family fun day and we had a couple of hundred families come through.
Oh, that's great.
I promoted it heavily through just posters that I had printed, and thank you to the local stores that supported us by popping those up, and social media again.
Yep.
And so the response we had to that was fantastic, because then we were able to add people to our emailing list. We do a regular email newsletter.
Great.
So we keep in contact with people regularly. We don't spam people, but we make sure that the information we're providing is useful. And so, you know, that was a huge benefit from those couple of hundred families that came through. We added, I think it was about 70 people to the emailing list, which is statistically actually very good.
It's really good.
And it's interesting because you say that to people who aren't sort of in the industry or aware of marketing, and they're like, oh, a couple of hundred and you only got 70, but that's actually great.
Yeah.
So that's been really useful. And since we had that open day, we've just had a huge response, and people instantly fell in love with what we were doing, and so became very, very supportive.
It's I love this part of it, and this is one of the questions I'm asking a lot of people on this podcast, is the importance of that digital realm of a business. And, you know, for many businesses out there, and the majority of people that I speak to will have some form of a bricks and mortar, you know, business up and running, a tangible thing that people can go to. And some people are quicker to it than others, but some people still think that, especially in a face-to-face business where you're providing a service that, you know, you need the person to be in front of you. So it might be more of a service-based industry or whatnot, that a lot of people are struggling to find the value in having an online presence. And just from what you said there, of just from a marketing point of view, to bring awareness to what you're doing. I mean, ultimately, the majority of your services do encourage and are probably require that you need to be present. More ways than one.
Yes, definitely.
But you can still use the digital world to be able to bring that attention here and ultimately get people to walk into the studio.
Oh, definitely. I can honestly say, whether we're looking back at when we were just doing sporadic workshops in halls or from the time we opened the studio, if I didn't have an online presence, I wouldn't have a customer.
Yeah.
It's that simple. All of my clients have come through social media or from word of mouth via social media. So, social media has built this business.
Have you primarily stuck on a platform like Facebook? I mean, I know that we mentioned your website as well, but has Facebook been sort of the main driver as far as engaging and connecting with people, or do you use other areas as well to try and test the waters?
Facebook, and when I was doing the sporadic workshops, it was only Facebook.
Yep.
I didn't have a website for close to 3 years when I was doing just the sporadic workshops, because there wasn't a lot of point to it, because I was, it was sporadic.
Yeah.
Then once I built the website, I used Facebook to drive people to the website. So that became a powerful tool. And then I brought Instagram on board this year. Yeah. Facebook is still the biggest source of new clients. Twitter's nothing to us, that's not, and that's a really important thing with social media, is you don't have to be everywhere. You have to be where your clients are. And my clients aren't on Twitter. Although, I should say an exception to that is another thing I do. I do business training for creatives as well.
Okay. Yep.
And social media management and web design, though I'm not doing as much of that anymore. And clients in those areas, still Facebook, but also some with Twitter with that. But that's very targeted approach when I'm doing those things. That's not a constant approach. But Facebook is a constant approach for the teaching and entertaining that we do.
I guess that's the advantage of, as you said before, being somebody that's come from that creative background, where at times, whether you've liked it or not, you've had to just pick up new skills and support yourself along the way. And so you're in a position now where you can cater for a whole different segment of people, depending on what you want to do. And so you can then tailor your approach depending on that particular person, or stereotypically what segment they fall into. So that's an advantage to have.
Yeah, definitely.
But it can get confusing as well, because there might be too many things on at the same time, too many options.
Yeah, and honestly, that's my biggest weakness. Well, it's one of my biggest strengths, and it's also one of my biggest weaknesses, is that I have too many ideas, and I believe in just doing them all at once. It's a strength to the business. It's a weakness to my health. But it's definitely been a strength for me having that background, because as well as being a creative through my whole professional career, I've also been an administrator and in management. So I started very young with my first business, and that was all trial and error, and had to teach myself. And so suddenly I was realising I had to go and do courses on bookkeeping and that kind of stuff, which I hate numbers, so I never thought I'd be there. And then I moved into management roles with theatre companies throughout my career as well, so I had to pick up more and more skills and more marketing skills. And then when I became very sick and couldn't work, I did start doing training. I taught myself how to do web building and social media, and did some online courses so I could work from my bed, essentially. And that's been invaluable, having that, which is why I've then started passing those skills on to other creatives. Because artists and creatives tend to be the kind that pop their head down when it comes to marketing, or that management side. It's like, oh, it's all too hard, I'll just paint pretty pictures and they'll come to me. And it doesn't work like that. So I only work with creatives on business building, because there's, I guess, different thinking involved and different hesitations as well.
And it's obviously, for a lack of a better word, it's a passion of yours because you come from that background yourself. So that it's almost there's this connection already because there's a like-minded similarity between yourself and that person that you're providing a service to. So there's more of a chance that you can get onto that same page as them, as opposed to somebody who is a completely different personality, comes from a different industry, has different interests and different visions and goals and a lifestyle as well than what you would be used to. So for you to be able to hone in on people that you can relate to straight off the bat, that already gives you an advantage to provide a service that they actually need.
Definitely. And I think, artists and creatives do tend to be the ones, as I said before, starting a business with $100.
Yep.
We aren't the ones that go into business with huge savings behind us because of the industry we're coming from. And so marketing is more important than ever.
Yep.
And that's not about going and spending tens of thousands of dollars on a website or fancy signs. It's about using what you can immediately. And it's easier now than it's ever been. And I can say that having been doing it for a couple of decades, marketing is so easy now thanks to social media. It's fantastic. But it does need to be constant. It does need to be strategic. And I think there's also, it can be a general belief amongst business owners, but I think also specifically with artists and creatives that marketing is yucky. It's slimy and it's sleazy.
It's like this non-glamorous thing, but also like an ego or a pride thing. People put their pride and their ego ahead of everything else, so they're worried about that. I mean, you would see this on a day-to-day basis working in sort of that creative industry, but worried about what other people think of what you do.
Definitely.
The fear of rejection, the fear of failure and whatnot.
Yeah.
So people would hesitate to even tell anybody that they do something that involves money.
Yeah. And there's still that old-fashioned belief in the artistic world of selling out.
Yeah.
If you make money and can feed yourself, you're selling out. No, you're staying alive. And to me, marketing isn't that at all. If it's done correctly, my role in the arts is to tell stories.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if I'm painting a picture, if I'm performing, I'm telling a story, I'm sharing a story. And marketing is part of that. Marketing is sharing our story. And we're very community focused. We want this studio to feel like a second home for the families that are in it. And a lot of us have told us that it does, which is fantastic. But everything we do is with our community in mind. And that includes the marketing. We're continuing to have them be involved in every aspect of the business by constantly sharing with them. And we get a good response from that because of the way we do it. It's not sleazy, it's sharing stories. It's
genuine and you're just showing what you do. You're celebrating what you do on a day-to-day basis, and as a result the bonus or the side effect to it is that it draws business and attention to what you do, and so ultimately then that leads to the financial reward. But I think this is a thing I continuously bring up with people over and over again. I think people are smarter than ever as far as sniffing out the BS, and they can see what's genuine and what's not. And I think if people are out there just highlighting the things that they love and people can see that they're passionate and they're genuine about what they do, then people gravitate towards that, as opposed to somebody that's on Facebook boosting a post or on Instagram boosting a post which is like this hard sell, buy a product or whatnot, which you just get annoyed and you have to try and close it down and say that it's irrelevant and try and get out of your feed. It's just that case of, this is something that you're passionate about. It's something that you spend a lot of time in your life being immersed in. Showing everybody why you love it is probably the biggest driver of getting people behind you. And,
definitely.
Bringing people in.
And our community are involved in that. I have parents sending me photos of their kids that they've taken from performances, or for instance, our Halloween party that we held last night. And I've had photos sent to me. We actually got so busy making sure the kids were having fun, we didn't get a chance to take our own photos. But I've had parents sending through photos of the kids before they came to the party or afterwards, and saying, share it, share what happened. We love what you do, share it with people. So that's great.
So sitting here today, a few months in, what's the current what's the current hurdle that you have at the moment? What's the current challenge that you have? Is it more just keeping it moving, or is there anything in particular that you're looking at going, all right, this is my next thing that I need to sort of tackle?
There's been two big hurdles for us. One, financial. As I said before about rents, and of course making sure my staff get paid. But this is in a business that has a lot of costs associated with it constantly, and I mean, that's our choice, but we're constantly upgrading props and sets and equipment, and there's more costs associated here than there would be with a lot of other businesses.
Yeah, sure.
Because of the number of different things we do. When we do birthday parties, we have over 30 different themes that people can choose from. So that's a lot of costumes and a lot of props and a lot of backdrops and a lot of sets, and then they all need replacing. Oh, and this is another thing I've been talking about with my team lately. When I ran a business like this 15, 17 years ago, props and things were all handcrafted. They were a lot more expensive, but once you bought them, you had them for life.
Yeah.
Now I cannot get them. They do not exist. No one makes them. And if they do, prop places, they will only rent them. They won't sell them. So the only things we can get now, they're a lot cheaper, hundreds of dollars cheaper. But a lot of them are broken before we get them out of the box. So it ends
up costing you more long term anyway, because you have to replace them all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the other side of that is that we're making a lot of our own. So that's a lot of staff hours put into that. It's constant. There's constant costs involved. So that's been one of the biggest things, and that will be a constant thing for the business as well. We will never get to the point where we have all of our equipment in place and we just go for it.
And this is my undiagnosed ADHD as a kid, no doubt, but the mind's always racing. But I guess, as you said earlier in the piece about seeing a hole in this area as far as something that doesn't exist and there's an opportunity there. Even looking at your current challenges potentially, and this might take some time once you get through all the stress of trying to get this business up and running and having some momentum and whatnot, that some of these challenges that you got could end up making you money because nobody else is supplying these sort of things. So suddenly if you're able to, this is long term, be able to dedicate particular hours to creating things that could then be sold to other businesses like yourself around the country, in other parts of the country, then suddenly there's another revenue stream for the business.
Yeah.
Early days, of course.
Oh, don't worry. It's in the back of my mind. Don't worry.
But I guess that's the exciting thing about running a business, is that sometimes an initial problem can end up being something very exciting that could lead to something successful down the track. But it's a case of having that open mind constantly and not letting something take or get the better of you.
Yeah, definitely. And again, this comes from experience. This isn't my first rodeo. So in the back of my mind constantly when I purchase something or we make something is always, what else can I use this for?
Yep. Where
else can this be used by someone else? We have an example is we have a photographic studio. I'm not a photographer, but we have to take photos of our products and our entertainers and our costumes and things like that. So I saw a great deal on local buy, swap and sell from a local photographer who was selling off a lot of professional equipment. Okay. So I purchased it knowing that I could make our own things look better, but also I now hire that out as a photography studio. So it's all just, seeing where else can things be used, who else can they be used by. And another example of that is I'm building online courses in the business area, business training for creatives. And so when I do them here in person, things are filmed, any materials that I create, which may be for a one-off workshop here, can then be used there. So it's just constantly, what else can you do with things?
Content.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So nothing should ever be used once. Everything has further life. Sometimes you just have to think a little bit laterally about that, about finding that extra life.
Oh, that's fantastic. one question that I'm trying to ask as many people as possible, because we are in a regional area. And I think for a large part of the population, the stereotype or the common way of thinking is that in order for any opportunity of success, you need to be either right smack bang in the middle of a metro area, or be relatively close to a large built-up area. Living down here now in a regional area, obviously there are challenges and there's unique things that you have to keep in mind. But I guess what I'm trying to probably show people is that you can pretty much live anywhere now, as long as there's some people in the area. But you can create things, you can create a business, you can create a lifestyle for yourself, and you're not restricted to just staying in a built-up area thinking that that's where all the opportunities are. I think as long as you've got probably an internet connection is probably a big thing, but there's so many possibilities.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, quite honestly, the concept of starting a theatre company down here is ridiculous. But I've been in enough regional areas to know that there's a need, and I knew it'd work. The funny thing is we actually moved to a regional area when I was sick to take away the temptation of me throwing myself back into work. So we were touring the world with Cirque du Soleil. I was an artistic director with them, and that's when I became chronically ill. And when we moved back to Australia, we were looking at where to move, and we didn't have any ties anywhere. And we decided that living in a regional area by the coast would be beautiful, it would be relaxing, it would be healthier. But also I wouldn't have that temptation of, state theatre companies constantly advertising jobs for me to jump in and go, yeah, I'll do that, even though I wasn't physically capable. So that was part of our move down here. So it's kind of ironic that this has all happened, because there is opportunity anywhere. And it's just a matter of identifying it and believing in yourself. And I think regional areas, self-employment is more important than ever, because you don't have the big corporations that you can rely on, or when you do, a lot of the work is seasonal. So I think self-employment is probably a very important consideration for anybody living in the regions.
Well, I think in most places it's something that most people should just at least have in the back of their mind as a possibility. I think the old school job security and staying in one job, and that's your entire lifespan. And,
definitely.
I mean, my father's been working for the same organisation for 40 years, and he's lucky, and he's happy with that. But I think those times are probably starting to disappear. And I don't think anybody has 100% security in their jobs anymore.
Oh, no.
They probably never did, but I think it's more prevalent now. And I think people are realising, I might not be here in 6 months or 12 months or 2 to 5 years' time, let alone the rest. So I think the more that people are thinking in the back of their mind, whether they actually want to dive into self-employment or not is another thing. But I think even just to understand that, if everything falls apart, there's always an option. There's always something that can be done. There's an avenue to go down.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a matter of identifying your own skills and thinking laterally about those skills. But nothing's secure anymore. I worked in Canberra for a couple of years with a theatre company there, but big belief there obviously is government jobs. Yep. Government jobs are secure, but they're not anymore. Most government positions are now on 12-month contracts, and then you have to reapply. Yep. So there's no such thing as a steady job anymore. It is a matter of identifying the skills, where you've worked, what you've done, and where you can go from that. We were talking before about hurdles and challenges here. The other big challenge for me has been staffing here, because it's a regional area and because I'm in performing arts. There aren't a lot of people floating around that move to Ulladulla and go, yes, I'm an actor, I live in Ulladulla. But again, I've been really fortunate with that, in that I did find a team member who studied acting, and while she was studying acting, her parents moved to the area, so she came to visit them on holidays, and she's a full-time staff member with me now. And I just found somebody via Facebook who was contacting people to say, does anyone want babysitting? And I'm meeting her this afternoon, and she's got a very similar background to me. And she's moved to the area for a sea change and currently is commuting to and from Sydney, but doesn't want to keep doing it anymore. Yeah. So, in my industry, performing arts, in an area where that just hasn't existed previously, if I can find people, anyone can. So, yeah.
I think that's great. And I think at a later date, we should probably catch up for a round 2 and just see how the business is tracking. And I mean, your experience in the industry has been, over a couple of decades now, but this business is only a few months, so it's still new, and it's an area that you haven't been in for a long period of time, so it's still sort of testing the waters and understanding what works and what doesn't. So it'd be interesting to see in 12 months' time or such what how much it changes, or whether the concept that you have now is just breathing and working as well as it is, or who knows. So it'd be interesting to do a catch up.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to. I'm interested to see what happens.
Stay tuned.
You never know.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thanks, everyone. If you want to reach out to KM, you can do so by checking out livewiretheatre.com. You can go to facebook.com/livewiretheatreNSW, or you can go to instagram.com/livewiretheatrearts. Alternatively, you can go to selfstarter.com.au. Check out the show notes. I'll dump everything over there to make it nice and easy for you guys. Now, as always, I'd love to hear from you. If you got something out of this particular podcast episode or any of the podcast episodes, please make contact with me. I'd love to get your insights, your perspective to keep building this podcast and make it bigger and better each and every episode. Now, I got 4 or 5 key points out of this particular episode, which I'll quickly run over now. But if there are additional things that you got, please let me know, reach out. So the first one was that KM was able to identify that there was a hole in the market. She could see that there was something missing. Now, this can be good and bad. If you've got no competition in the area, you don't know how well your business is going to run, but she's used it to her advantage and created a business that's obviously done reasonably well in the short space of time that it's been up and running. The second thing is the critical nature of Facebook at the moment for KM. She's been able to use it to connect with her community, with her clients, and with the local area to build awareness, engagement, and ultimately generate business for her. So Facebook, as it stands now, and these things always change as technology changes, but at the moment, Facebook is a critical thing. And I see personally a lot of businesses that still don't use Facebook a great deal to engage with their clients. So something to consider. The third point is, this is really interesting. KM mentioned in passing that there was no local media support. So whoever that was in particular, whether it be the newspapers or whatnot, not getting a lot of traction or response from the local media. Now, for a lot of people, you might think, oh God, that's an indication that I'm not on the right track. But KM's turned it around and really focused on building her community, building that word of mouth aspect, and using social media to ensure that she's got a reputation and a following that will stem into better business, and then at a later date maybe convince some local media to get behind what she's doing and get some further support. The fourth thing was creating additional content and products off the back of what they do currently as a business. So filming a lot of their workshops and creating online content. I think that's so cool. That just shows that the business can expand in a number of different ways, and that can provide further revenue streams for the business, and they don't have to just focus on one thing. Obviously, it's small steps, and you've got to slowly build these things, and you don't want to jump ahead too quickly. But I think just the fact that you're thinking along those lines is really, really cool. And I think that's something that we need to look at. What can we do to rebrand our content? How can we rehash it? How can we put it into another channel to make it better? So even with this podcast, doing it in an audio form, but then turning it into written content as well in a blog post and whatnot. So trying to find other ways to rehash and refresh the content into other domains to provide additional revenue streams is really, really cool. The other thing is just the list of clienteles that she looks at and services. It's not just individuals, it's schools, it's corporations, it's professional training, going out to nursing homes, just being really open as to the types of clients that she can cater for. And that's obviously going to help with the longevity of her business by being flexible and not just providing sort of a one-on-one service for private interest. It's something that can be scaled up for a business to provide workshops and whatnot. So really, really cool to see that there's a number of different avenues that KM will be going down in the future. And I can't wait to do a follow-up to see how the business is going down the track. So as mentioned before, selfstarter.com.au. Please go over there. You can check out all the links and resources to this episode and every other episode of the podcast. And until 2 weeks' time, that's right, every fortnight, take care and we'll speak soon. Thanks, guys.